just gonna kick off now and let people join if they want to dial in later. First, making sure everyone can hear us all right, doing a bit of a sound check. Can you let us know in the chat if you can hear us or if we need to do something here with our mics?
What's up? Cool. Thanks, Anthony. Good to see you, mate. Anthony.
Yes, cool. Thank you, guys. If at any point you maybe can't hear us anymore, you, I don't know, missed something, please just let us know in the chat. Yeah. I'll get started introducing the team here, and then we can kick off the event.
Awesome.
We've got two Mythbusters with us today. They're going to be helping us bust some really big capital raising myths that are out there based on their experiences. That's maybe why you see them wearing these awesome lab coats. We're going to get very scientific today. They're basically our mad scientists that we've got in-house here. I'll get started with Johnny Quattro here on my left.
Hello.
He is an engineer by nature. He co-founded a snowboard company, which he then IPO'd. He also founded built a music app, and that got bought by a big US tech giant. It's confidential, so I can't call the name, but make some big guesses and you're probably right. And he created a binding system for Burton snowboards, and those binding systems are still used, so probably around over 1 million bindings on Burton boards still got Johnny's signature on it.
Yeah.
At least 1 million. He was one of the early inventors of kiteboards, and he also operated as an angel investor, worked at different VCs across the US and Asia. On the far left of me, we've got Cam. He's a visionary by nature. He worked at a startup during the start of his career that raised $120 million, but then failed. We learned a lot from that, I can imagine. We'll be probably hearing some stories on it later. He also raised $50K for a video streaming platform that didn't end up going to market. He co-founded CNS Dose, which is a medtech company that got to $1 million in pre-seed funding, and he was able to launch that company into the US as well. His previous company, Pitch Black, founded and incubated Mr. Yum. That was 3 years ago, and Mr. Yum just raised a $90 million Series A round. Johnny Q is our head of investment here at Pitch VC. Cam is our managing director. I'm Roselle. I'll be your host for tonight. I'm the investment lead for Pitch VC, first point of contact for all founders. Looking forward to get started.
Nice.
Bust some myths.
Bust some myths. Bust it up.
Do it. Guys, if you have any questions throughout busting the myths, just put them in the chat. Some of them will maybe do right away, and some of them will save to the end, but just pop them all in the chat so we can answer all of them as we go. Right. Got our first myth. Guys, so let's say I've got a new startup idea. It's basically the new Uber. It's such an awesome idea. Is that all I need to get investment?
That's a good question.
It's a good question. It's one that we have to deal with on a daily basis.
Like, if you just got an idea, and that's it. So we got
That's it.
like we got to test this out. Like just an idea.
Yeah, well, lots of people have ideas and don't have capital to get them going. And so, can I just go and ask some people for money?
Just from an idea.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say I don't know, I would test this out, but I would say kind of like, you know, you need more than just an idea. You know, I mean, like, you kind of need like, you know, idea, you know, like team or like great, you know, experience, you know, back, you know, like sort of a founder that's got a track.
Ah, ça va, ça va. Je suis sur un Zoom pour une demi-heure, jusqu'à 6 heures.
That's it,
Maybe someone's on mute.
You can
So I'm thinking like we've got idea, you know, we've got team, you know, like we've got to back it up with experience.
Yeah, totally. So there's an example, and you know, always look at the evidence there, and there's some examples of startups like Uber. Another one which I love, which I use as my email app, Superhuman. And they're founders who, and they basically raise money from an idea, no pitch yet. But they both, in those two examples, had a startup company which had been super successful, exited, and given a whole bunch of money back to investors and to themselves, right? So that's what you're talking about, experience. Right? So if you've got experience, you've got runs on the board, you can go to an investor and say, hey, I've got another idea, give me $1 million.
Yeah, I reckon if you've got runs on the board, you can definitely probably raise up an idea.
But most of us don't.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you go like just an idea, great idea, like, you know, are you able to get investment? I'd say no. I'd say you need more than just an idea.
Yeah.
I'd say you could, once again, it's about, capital raising is about trust. Right?
Yeah.
And so you can get it for your mum and your dad because they trust you. They've known you since your uncle, maybe.
Definitely, yeah.
But if you're going to get any serious capital from serious investors, I'd say no too.
I say no too. I say no. I say busted.
Oh, so, okay. I need to.
I say that's
more than
it's busted. You need more than just an idea.
You need more than an idea.
So then, what would you need? So what would if people watching this?
I'd say like you need not just an idea. You need to have like a solid team around you, like people with have experience or domain expertise. So if you're doing something like in the medical field, or if you're doing something like in biotech, or you're doing something in let's say, you know, like fintech, you know, if you're coming from the fintech space and your financial business, you know, you need to have like, you know, like that domain experience. You need to kind of like work in the financial sector to kind of like say, hey, this is an idea. I see a problem. I want to like, you know, reinvent this kind of industry. I want to solve this problem. And so here's my idea. Here's my experience. Here's my team. Here's my product. Go. And then you're going to get money.
And I think I'd add to that. I think it's a bit of a spectrum, right? So it's like on one end, on this spectrum, small amounts of capital, giving away large amounts of equity. On the other end, it's like, you know, large amounts of capital, small amounts of equity, right?
Yeah, totally.
And it depends where you sit along that. The more validation you can do, the more you're going to get along that line. You can get larger amounts of capital, smaller amounts.
Yeah.
So the goal is to try and validate, research, build a team, you know, as early as possible.
Absolutely.
Ideas are a dime a dozen.
Busted.
Busted that one.
That's busted. So the next myth number 2 is I should raise money when I need it.
Yeah, so let's say I'm already running a startup or started doing some work on my startup. Money is running out quickly, so everything's expensive. I'm like, I need some extra money coming in to be able to get my business going. Is this a good time for me to raise money when I really need it?
Well, look, I've got this saying that says...
It's a good saying. It's a good saying. I like that saying. I like this saying.
Like, I've got this saying, it's like, and I learned it from like this, you know, really great VC that I worked with like years ago in Hong Kong. He's an awesome guy, and he's a close friend of mine. I learned the saying DROON, DROON. Don't run out of money. So if you're going to build a business, like the last thing you want to do is run out of money, right? So, but you don't want to raise money for your business when you absolutely need it. You want to raise money when you can. You want to raise money when, like, essentially you're in a position of strength and like you can communicate to investors the value that you're about to create, And essentially, if you're raising from that position, investors are going to like buy into your business, buy into your story, right? So my feeling is like, if you're raising money when you absolutely need it, you're on your last, like, let's say, $10,000 in the business, or your last like $2,000 in the business. I mean, I was in that position where I was on my last $2,000 in the business. But very fortunate with our music company that we basically, what we did is we had won a bunch of awards which came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden investors came to us and said, hey, we want to invest in the business. So it was kind of like a little bit of a situation where we built all this value and we're running out of money, but we didn't raise because we were needing like to get more money in. It just happened that we won an event, we won this awards, and we managed to get investors in. But I would say that, like, you don't raise when you need it, because investors can tell that you're in need of cash and your business is not doing really well. I'd say you raise when you can in a position of strength. What do you raise?
Yeah, and I would definitely agree. I think that one of the more common things, when we listen to early stage entrepreneurs is they'll say, we'll talk about capital raising. And the philosophy that we use around capital raising is to bring investors along for a journey.
Right.
And a lot of founders want to wait until their idea is perfect, or their startup is perfect, or their tech is right to be able to start then talking to investors.
Yeah.
And the reality is, an idea or a tech is never going to be perfect. The further along you get, the more holes that you see in it. And capital raising takes time. Once again, we go back to this building trust, right? That takes time to build trust. Yeah. And so you've got to start, I would start from day one. That doesn't mean you start asking for money from day one, but it means you start building relationships with investors from day one. And if you then come back in 3 months or communicate with them regularly along the way, then you're able to secure that capital at the right time. I'll give you one little anecdote of I worked at a startup that raised $120 million and failed. It was constantly raising money when it needed it. And just a humble brag here, but I'm really good at table tennis.
Right.
The best table tennis player in the office by far. The reason I am is because that startup always was raising money when it needed it. And so it couldn't pay us.
Yeah.
And sometimes we go 2 months without pay. So we played a lot more table tennis during that time.
Right.
And so during that time, I became very good at table tennis because we weren't getting paid. And we were playing table tennis for like an hour a day, the whole office was. So.
Nice.
So they're the issues that you start to run into when you don't have any money.
So what do you reckon? I mean, like, I'm saying this is busted.
I reckon it's busted.
Yeah, sounds like
it's
it.
busted. No. Busted for
Busted.
sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't do it when you need it. It's probably too late. All right. So tying into what you were just saying, Cam, this startup you worked at that raised money because they needed it. They failed in the end.
Yeah.
Maybe that ties into another myth. Like when I talk to investors about my startup and I have some challenges going on and some issues in a few areas of the business, is that something I shouldn't hide from them, or should I?
It's a really good question, and I see this happen all the time. That where founders, investors and other entrepreneurs aren't stupid, right? You see lots of issues that would exist even before maybe founders see them. And what the temptation can be as a founder is to say all the good things. We've got massive market size, we're doing this, we're doing that. So I don't know, is that the best thing to do, Johnny? You reckon is to sell the benefits and the good things of your startup as opposed to the
Well, I'm from the old school, right? So I believe that honestly, an investor, when he's sitting on the other side of the table and you're negotiating with an investor, he's on the other side of the table, right? But ultimately, you want him to sit on your side of the table. So ultimately, through the transaction of investing and capital raising an investor becoming a shareholder, that exact transaction, that relationship, brings him onto your side of the table. So he's on your team. So if you hide issues from him or her, you know, when you're in the negotiation phase, it's a really bad sign. You know, like you're going to lose trust in him.
Yeah.
So in my view, like when the business is like struggling, or there's you know, human resources issues, or there's some tech issues, whatever it is, you've got to like be upfront with investors, because investors are going to go, hey, this is a person that has authenticity, and we want to back this person. We want to back this one. So I would say that, you know, I'd say this myth that you shouldn't hide issues. I'd say it's confirmed. You shouldn't hide issues.
I'd agree. Confirmed. Transparency, honesty, integrity.
Honesty, integrity, confirmed, bang.
Confirm that myth. So be upfront and honest when you talk to investors.
Yeah.
Shows actually strength and humility, and they can probably help you with them
Absolutely.
as well.
That's a really great point. They can help you with those issues. You don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
You don't get any help.
That's exactly right. If you don't ask for help, you'll never get help.
Yeah.
You ask for help. So what's this next myth?
Yeah, so this is something that I would be concerned about if I get in that position. Talking to investors, like I own a large percentage of my startup, I don't know, maybe 90%.
Yeah.
Talk to investors. I have to give them equity, I have to give them a percentage. And it sounds like something not really good thing to do. If I lose too much of that percentage of my shareholding, I can maybe lose decision-making rights or control over my startup. So is this something I should do? Like, should I protect my shareholding at all costs?
That's
a really good question. I've been in this position, you do worry about it.
Yeah.
As a founder.
Yeah.
You know, you worry about losing too much control.
Yeah.
Losing the payday at the end. You know, you start looking at, can I get a $100 million company? What is 10%? Is $10 million worth that journey at the end of the day?
Yeah.
So it's a really good question.
Yeah.
And we see it lots. We see it lots where, you know, founders don't want to give up percentages, and rightly so.
Yeah. And actually, we see also lots where investors don't want founders to get too diluted also. But here's an interesting twist to this entire, you know, in my view, like being a founder, it's about growing. It's about growing your community of, you know, team members, investors, everybody's coming onto your journey, right? So there are going to be different types of people that come onto that journey. You're going to be like people that just provide money, or people that provide just like strategic value, like maybe someone that's like an ex-CEO of some, you know, industry, that you want to have them sitting on your advisory board, you want to like carve out some percentage for them. Like you might have someone that like has money and strategic value. So I think in this situation, you know, should I protect my shareholding? I would say no. I would say what you want to be able to do is find a balance and say, what is the right amount of percentage that I'm willing to give up in my startup to bring on the type of person, whether that's just money, or whether that's strategy, or whether it's a combination of both. In some cases, like you might be willing to give an extra few percentage points to a great advisor, right? So I would say that no, I would say this is busted.
We lost Rosie. I think we've got some audio's a little bit soft, so we'll just try and talk a little bit.
The music in the background is also causing issues.
Maybe
so we killed the music. Music's dead.
Cool. Music's dead.
Thanks, Dan.
I would also kind of look at this slightly different, where the focus shouldn't necessarily be on percentage.
Right.
When you really look at a cap table, you look at the share price and how many shares. And so I think the focus, what you want to see as you go through capital raising rounds is increase in the share price and increase in your personal overall wealth and the value of the company, as opposed to the percentage as a whole. And there are multiple ways to protect things like decision making, and then that can include, having different types of shares, different categories of shares, and those shares having different rights to those shareholders.
Yeah.
And so, it's not about having 51% necessarily.
Yeah.
To control that. That's on the presumption that all shares are equal. Not all shares are equal. You can design a shareholding and a capital raising strategy that allows you to both maintain control, grow a company to its right size. And I think having the right, I agree with you, the balance, and then a really well planned out capital raising strategy from that dot, so that the framework that you work within at each round.
Yeah, just to add to that, I would say that, definitely as a founder, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to, bring your vision to life. And so control is a really interesting point Cam makes, we both, I think we both see that clearly. If you're building a business and you're the visionary and you're the founder of that business, the worst position to be in is where investors are controlling the business and investors are steering and strategically making decisions for your business. I think ultimately as a founder, you may give up a few extra percentage points, but if you have the controlling right and the highest voting right, I think that is still in a position of strength. And when you're in a position of strength in a business, you can steer the business, right? And you can steer your startup and its future. So I'd say that this is a bust. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, it's a bust.
Busted.
Sounds like it. Another
Ooh,
busted.
Busted.
So,
what do we here?
yeah, capital raising often goes hand in hand when talking about pitch decks. And
Right.
a lot of founders, when I meet with them, they have an amazing pitch deck, and that's super impressive. But question, do you really need a killer pitch deck to be able to raise serious capital?
Maybe just to define, so the viewers around the world that don't know what a pitch deck is, we're talking about a presentation, right? Giving a presentation of your business or your idea, right? Sort of a document, it's like a slideshow. It shows all of your, all of the bits and pieces of the business. Do you need an absolutely amazing killer deck to raise capital?
It's a good question. And once again, I like all these myths because we see them daily. But I've seen, once again, looking at the evidence, right? We're looking at the evidence. I've seen capital raised on terrible pitch decks. I've personally raised $1 million from 2 investors that we didn't even have a pitch deck.
Yeah, right.
And then I've also seen amazing pitch decks not raise a cent, and have had amazing pitch decks myself that didn't raise a cent.
Right.
So the evidence there at this point, from what I can see, is saying you don't need a killer pitch deck to raise serious capital.
Well, I would say that, I hear what Cam's saying, but I would say that, if you can't communicate the business in a pitch deck, and if you don't have the ability to lay out the storytelling, what's your problem? What's your solution? What does the market look like? I meet with founders every single day, and the biggest, say one point of contention that I have with almost all founders is a lot of them just don't understand the market that they're actually selling to, or the market size. And so I see it in their pitch deck, and then I work with them to kind of really refine that part of their story, drill down into the actual market of their business and who they're going after, and then work out those unit economics around the market. I see that almost every day, right? And I would say that you kind of do need to have a killer pitch deck, because it doesn't have to be pretty and photos and all. I'm not talking about that as a killer pitch deck. I'm talking more in the lines of, you need to have the right information in there so that the investor can clearly understand what your business is. So I don't know. But I also hear his side.
I hear what you're saying, and I think for me, what it comes down to more is the substance behind the pitch decks,
Yeah.
right? And so, you know, if there is substance there, then absolutely,
Right,
the pitch deck is a representation of substance,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And so the pitch deck is a tool.
Yeah.
You know, I view it as a tool, one tool, and not even the most important tool.
Yeah.
To do it. So if you think of once again having a capital raising strategy and understanding all the tools that you have and should use to raise capital,
Yeah.
and the pitch deck being one of them. A lot of people would spend, for example, I get frustrated at this when I read, they clearly have spent dozens and dozens of hours on their pitch deck, but not necessarily spent that same amount of time getting customers.
Right, absolutely.
Or doing research, for example, you know, they'll tinker with the colors and the images and the messaging, but they won't dive deep into
Right. Yeah.
research and understanding who their customer is in the first place.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it's plausible.
That's plausible.
We'll call it plausible.
Yeah.
We'll call it plausible.
Let's call it, yeah, I'd say it's plausible. It's plausible. You know, it could go both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, fair enough.
It's definitely an important tool.
So
Yeah.
plausibility, tick.
Done.
Nice. What do we got next?
Again on pitch decks, but this is when you should have a clear pitch deck. Let's assume you spent some hours on it. Hopefully have an amazing startup to back that up. If I just send my amazing pitch deck to as many investors as I can find, I just do a search on Google, VCs, angel list, and I just send them to everyone. Should be able to secure some meetings and some funding. What do you say?
I've got a pretty crude analogy for this. I'm going to use it, but forgive me for doing this. I liken to sending pitch decks to random strangers as the equivalent of sending dick pics to random strangers.
You don't want to be doing that.
You don't want to be doing that, right? Once again, I go back to this trust thing, whereas raising capital is about building trust.
Yeah, sure.
And I get, you know, every day someone will email me or text me or send me one on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
a pitch deck.
Yeah.
And I don't even open it. If that's all they send,
Yeah.
I don't open it.
No.
Would you like to invest? Here's my pitch deck. I'm just like, well, I don't know you. So
Yeah.
the answer's no.
Yeah.
If you want to have a conversation, if you want some help, always open it, always reply.
I get like messages every single day on LinkedIn going, hey, check out this business. I get these massive messages with like people just like bombarding me with like, you know, here's my business, here's my deck, you know, here's what we're doing, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, I think that what a founder should do is actually research the investor and kind of really understand, is that investor someone that you actually want to have in our company? So if the answer is yes, that investor is someone that we actually want to have in the company, I think your approach is going to be very different. You're going to like nurture that approach. You're going to say, hey, listen, hey, Mr. X or Mrs. X, you know, like we really think you're amazing. You know, like we believe you're the right investor to our company. You know, can we share our deck with you? Can we have a meeting? I think your approach is going to be very different if you've done your research on who those investors are. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Totally.
Yeah.
I'll give you a really good example of someone who did this to me last week. I think I even showed you the screenshot.
Yeah.
Someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and they said, I went through your website and watched some of your videos. I love your tone of voice. I love your brand. I love your 9 commandments that you have. My favorite commandment is, can't remember which commandment they said, but they said it. And he said, out of all the VCs I looked at, yours is the VC that we would like to have on our cap table the most.
Yeah.
And then what he did, he sent a little screenshot of an Excel spreadsheet that he'd created. And in the top of the spreadsheet, it said something like, VCs I want to invest in my company.
Right.
And it had us number 1.
Yeah.
And then it had
Yeah.
all these others after that. Now, he could have done that for every single VC and just changed it to the new screenshot. But I definitely love the approach and love the creativity in that, which goes to your point.
I thought it was great. He's done his research. He definitely done his research.
Exactly.
So I mean, and send a pitch deck to everyone. Like I'd say, no way, Jose.
No. The other thing, on another point about that is that your pitch deck needs to be tailored to who you're presenting to, right? So every time you present, you want to be asking, are these slides relevant? Because some people will use the same deck for a customer as they do for an investor.
Absolutely.
And they'll just skip over some slides, but really the messaging should be very different.
Should be. I'd say busted.
Yeah, could even be different, I guess. If you're
Totally busted.
talking to different
Totally.
investors,
Totally.
you want different things from them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally busted. Totally.
All right, so that's an obvious one. Busted.
What do we got next? Myth number 7. Oh,
Yeah, so there's a lot involved when I think about capital raising. There's a lot of legal things, a lot of documents and contracts going on, and it's a bit overwhelming. I don't know, it doesn't mean that I'm maybe not ready to do capital raising yet because I don't understand this completely.
So yeah, it's a good question. It's interesting. I don't know. Like I don't think you need to have all the legal skills. You know, like if you're a founder and you've got a great business idea, like you don't need the legal skill. They definitely do help understanding your company. I'll give you an example. Like when I raised money, like when I did the music app and basically got to a point where I was going to raise money and I had investors that were interested, I suddenly had to think, oh my God, I didn't even know what I didn't even have any idea about like raising money and documents and legal documents. So first thing I did was partner up with a lawyer and learn everything like really quickly. So we super quick through that schooling of like shareholders agreements, term sheets, all that sort of stuff, right? Now I don't think I needed that knowledge to actually raise the money, because I think that like the investors would have helped me through that process. Like, so for instance, what we do at pitch, like, when founders don't have that knowledge, like we really help them through that process, and we basically guide them through, we design the documents for them, they don't necessarily need to have all the legal skills, and we will help them by educating them. We'll also help them by like drafting those documents for them. We're doing a round right now, and like literally we've done all the documents. The last round we're doing, it's great. Female-led founders. We're just about to close ground, and you know what? Like they don't have let's say the legal sort of acumen, and I think that's totally okay. If you're working with great, authentic, VC firms or great, authentic investors, they're not going to take advantage of founders. They want the best thing for the founder, right?
Totally. The other thing I would add to that is I still don't fully understand contracts and docs, right? And so I pay people who do understand contracts,
exactly.
docs.
Yeah.
And I say, this is what I want, this is what I'm trying to get.
Yeah.
And they lay out the risks to me and say, this is a risk, that's a risk.
Yeah.
Are you willing to, and then I can make decisions about the risks that I'm willing to bet.
Exactly.
And the reality is, in every new doc you do, another lawyer is going to get involved and they're going to put a new line in there that you've never heard before. We happens to us all the time. I mean, you've had 30 years experience at looking at these type of docs.
Yeah.
And
we're getting up 30.
You show your age.
I'm like way older than I am. I'm not that old, man. Like, seriously.
But we still get new lines in there that we don't understand.
Yeah, right.
Or ways of writing those lines.
Yeah.
Like
so true.
We pulled that line out from the lawyer the other day. We were like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, what does that even mean?
And so we had to get our lawyers and their lawyers to help us understand what that line meant.
To translate.
To translate, exactly.
So, you know, like, I'm just gonna say, like, no, like, bust it. You don't need to know all the contracts, you know, to raise capital. I think you can, you know, align yourself with great, you know, people, investors like us.
And as Johnny did, you learn along the way.
You learn
The first time you raise capital, you've got to understand high level what you need to do and when you need to do it.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to, you know, reading the contract negotiation, you'll read it and you'll learn it and things you don't understand.
And, you know, just a quick shout out to one of the founders out there, because I know she's watching, Lilly. Like, you know, she has been like a great founder where she has like literally learned on her feet like really quickly about legal docs. You know, she's working with, you know, a legal firm in Sydney that we connected her with, and, you know, she's doing super well, super amazing. You know, so, you know, great founders, what great founders do, they want to learn everything. They're completely open to, like, you know, I'm like an open book, you know, give me all the information in the world, you know, like they literally want to become Google, you know, and I'd say that one of our founders that's inside our family of Pitch, like, is Lilly from Smooth Move. She's an amazing founder.
So,
And I reckon she's going to be like a Google, right? She's, you know, she's awesome. So shout out to her.
really,
I think we're getting to the last one.
Oh, nice one.
Yeah, so once you secure maybe some investor meetings and you're sitting at a table, got these potential investors sitting across you, and just wondering, should I say to them, like, hey, I'm also talking to this VC and those angel investors. Should I name drop and talk about that with investors?
yeah, it's a good one.
Good question.
It's a good one.
Should I name drop?
I think first of all, the investor community in Australia specifically is very small.
It's small, yeah, it's very
So there's a good chance if you name drop, there's a good chance that someone else they're going to know. The investor's going to call up the other and go, oh, so see you're looking at this deal.
Yeah.
Potentially, right? So there is always risk when you name drop.
Yeah.
Having said that, name dropping can be beneficial though, right? It can show that there's other people interested, create a bit of FOMO, fear of missing out from investors, and say, okay, that guy's looking at it, I'm interested, or girl or woman, I'm interested, right? So what's the right way to go about that?
I reckon, like, if you've got investors that are like verbally committing and they're saying yes, and they go, yeah, we want to invest in your business, then absolutely you want to tell other investors that, you know, investor A or investor B has, you know, like, we've got some verbal commitments from those investors, and these are their names and these are who they are, because ultimately they're going to be on those legal documents anyway. So if you've got investor A, B, or C that says yes, we want to invest, then yeah, you definitely want to name drop, right? You want to tell other investors about them. But if you've just had a meeting with an investor, and then your next investor, you said, hey, I just had a meeting with these guys, and, you know, there's a lot of interest from these guys. You know, like, I think that may be pushing it.
Totally. And then the risk on that side, if they then do get the contract or the term sheet, which has the names of the investors on the cap table, and they're not on there, and you've oversold them to be on there, then you risk of losing an investor as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it depends. I think it comes back to this honesty and integrity and the stage that you're at, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, if you genuinely have a verbal commitment, it's okay to be honest and open about that, unless, well, one caveat on it, unless the investor has said otherwise, please don't.
Yeah.
And that does happen.
That does happen.
From time to
That
time.
does happen.
Situation. Then you can, unless the investor has said otherwise. But if it's just meeting, then it's probably not within your interest to name drop. Maybe say, hey, we've met with a number of other investors around town, but that doesn't give much up anyway.
No.
Because they're expecting you to do that.
Yeah. I would say that, you know, I'd agree. I'd say it's plausible.
Plausible.
Yeah.
Plausible. This myth is
Be
plausible.
careful, but definitely name drop when it's.
Yeah. So where are we at, Rosie? How are we doing?
Yeah, well, we've gone through 8
8 myths.
8 myths.
Wow.
Um,
Busted a few, we
busted
confirmed.
most of them.
Paused a couple.
Yeah, I think we did pretty well,
Done
but
right.
there's only 8 myths, and I assume looking at the audience here, there's a bunch more questions left after talking about all of this on capital raising. So would love to hear
Q&A.
from you, everyone in the audience. Do you have any more questions or myths or whatever you can think of relating to capital raising, or even if it's maybe like a personal question for Johnny Cam after all of this, some stories, some pop-ups.
Question, yeah.
You can always try and ask to see if they answer.
Yeah, I might answer a couple of personal questions,
Yeah.
not too many.
Oh, we'll just wait until they come in. But maybe, Cam, you've shared a few like ventures that maybe weren't too successful and some
Yeah.
mistakes. I think Johnny, I just hear these amazing stories about your startups and
Yeah.
things you've created, but there must have been some fuck ups there. Do you
Oh.
have something to share?
Yeah,
Too many to mention.
yeah, there's definitely.
Is that the personal question or a startup question?
Yeah, like,
Well, let's keep it startups for now, but
startups now. Like definitely, you know, like I've definitely tried quite a few times with quite a few different founders. I've helped a few founders and seen, you know, situations where I guess the most common thing that I've come across when I've, you know, got involved in early stage, you know, founders, that most of it is like implosion, you know, where, you know, the team sort of implodes, you know, the founders fight each other, they disagree on things, and so my investment is out the window, you know, because literally the whole thing falls apart. You know, I've been in situations where there's been so much like infighting. We had a really successful startup business in Hong Kong like many years ago that was like founded by young founders, and I got involved and I became like investor slash sort of, you know, interim CEO, and we started this business and it was doing super well. We were like selling like, you know, this kind of like a whole new way of, you know, recruitment, and it was done through hackathons, you know, like software hackathons. But the entire team just like collapsed because the business was really successful and everybody was fighting over shares and like ownership. And like, I want this and I want more of this and I want to be the boss and I want to be this. And so the entire thing just collapsed, you know, and it was so sad because like literally the business was amazing, you know, and it just fell apart because of the founders just fighting each other. So, you know, look, startups are really hard, you know, like they're very hard and it requires a lot of dedication. And it requires like a lot of humility. You know, just being very humble about the journey and just going for it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's really here we go. We've got a nice question up here.
We got a question there, like
I think we might.
That's
What's the
only
difference between a piece?
No, I was looking at the one underneath
I
that.
want to eat that.
I don't
Johnny
think that was
single.
shared
Is
to
Johnny
everyone.
single?
Who asked that question?
I think that was the sneaky question there.
That's a sly question. No, Johnny's not single.
There, it's out. Johnny's not single, everyone. It's confirmed.
Busted? Busted. Is Johnny single? Busted.
Busted.
But the question above that,
Yeah.
I think you can answer this question really well.
Difference between VC and an angel syndicate?
Good question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So a VC, like venture capital, the way they invest into a business is, imagine this, right? So a VC is a business, and the VC will do, you know, the most important thing the VC does is they will set up a fund. And the fund is like a pool of money. And it comes in from a bunch of people. They all put that money into a pool, right? And then the VC is the manager. And the manager basically decides where that money gets invested. So the VC is responsible for making those investments and building a portfolio. And so building a portfolio of investments. And so ultimately, when one of those investments or all of those investments becomes really successful, then that portfolio will return back to the investors that invest into that pool or fund, right? That's a VC. That's a typical venture capital business.
So this pool of investors in a VC, they don't have much to say in terms of who the investments go to?
Exactly. The way a typical VC is structured is like the manager has all of, like, let's say, the operating controls, and the investors get sort of preferential returns. So the investors don't have controls and they don't really make decisions, but they get preferential returns, right? Where the manager will get a small portion of the returns and the investor gets the majority of the returns, right? So that's the relationship. An angel syndicate is where there's a bunch of individual angels and they'll invest as a group into a deal. And whatever percentage that breakdown is, it's just sort of broken down on deal by deal. So it's a very sort of different process. A VC is very hard to get investment from. So if you're a founder, and all the founders out there, you got to think of it this way. Like, as a VC, as a manager of a VC, when you're investing, when you're managing a pool of cash, a pool of money, like when we're looking at you as a founder, we're asking this simple question: will your business return the entire fund that we have created? Because what we're looking for is really big returns, right? So that means that what we're looking at is great founders that can build globally scalable businesses and that can generate tons of cash really fast. And if they can do that, then the answer is a VC will invest in you every day of the week.
Cool, good answer. Let's go to Emmanuel's one. Does VC invest in ideas alone, or they usually wait for angel investors to commit and see traction before they come in? Good question, Emmanuel. If you think of a decision-making process that a VC makes, like a scorecard, for example, it's not a yes or no answer. There's going to be many different things that an investor will look for, right? One of them will be team. Who are the founders? Who are the team? One of them is traction. One of them is market size, market opportunity. And then it's about scoring those to see whether they fit within the VC fund's investment mandate. Now, that could be an idea if you've got really great founders with a really great market opportunity and a really great market size. Or it could be, a score, you could need to wait for other investors to come in to commit and see traction to commit, right? So there's no one thing that you've got to do. And so the thing is to have a great idea, have a great team, start trying to build traction, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Now, most investors don't invest in ideas a lot, and most VCs, especially, don't invest in just ideas. We're quite unique in that we do come in at idea stage and invest to the right founder, the right team, and the right opportunity. But as Johnny said, we've got our investors that we've got to make sure that we manage their money responsibly, and so we've got to make sure that score adds up.
Well, wasn't that question Manuel just asked, wasn't that myth number one? We just busted that. Ideas, right? Alone.
Yeah.
The VCs won't invest in ideas alone. They'll invest in, a founder that will lead the idea. So they'll invest in a great idea with a great founder. Someone that they are convinced that will take this business all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's jump to that next one. Do you invest into, Jordan, do you invest in the companies that are in the same industry as previous investments you've made? Yes and no. So we will, if it's the right opportunity, the right founder. and know if it's not the right opportunity,
Yeah.
not the right thing.
Yeah.
So we're in it, the way we do it is we're industry agnostic. So we obviously have a better and bigger insight into industries that we know well.
Yeah.
But we don't rely on that industry knowledge to necessarily make all our
Yeah,
investments.
I'll just add to that. I think also a lot of VCs will invest in competitors to hedge their bets. You know, so it's very common to see a VC firm investing. Let's say that you mentioned Uber before. It's common that you'll see a VC firm invest in Uber and Lyft, or Uber and Diddy, because like literally they'll hedge the bet. One of them will be the ultimate winner, and they might just play and invest in both of those because they believe in the category, right? So, I mean, yeah, I'd say the answer to that question is, you know, it's totally case by case.
Yeah. What
else we got?
Karthik.
Okay. For a pre-revenue startup, should they be spending much of their limited capital on marketing to get more customer base to get a seed investment, or from their hypothesis of the idea and getting some early traction in the non?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's one or the other necessarily. What you have to think about is, I think more customer base is the wrong way of thinking potentially, because it's not about more, right? We see lots of founders, and I've been made this mistake myself, where we use what I refer to as vanity metrics, right? So more customers does not necessarily mean better, right? So it's about finding the right customers and getting the right engagement. I'll give you a perfect example of the startup that raised 120 mil. They had a shitload of money. They did a massive marketing campaign, and they were at one point they were the most downloaded app on the App Store, the number one on the App Store. They got 1 million downloads in a month because it was the days where you could put out an ad and get $1 per download. So they spent $1 million on marketing, got 1 million downloads. 2 months later, they had 10,000 monthly active users, right? And so you can see there the problem with just getting spending.
Україні це стандартно, по Швеції це трафік, який ще був у нас.
To get a bigger customer base is the wrong thinking. So the reason why you go about a hypothesis, I'll get that out. The reason why you go about getting a hypothesis and gradually getting this traction through research and then through focusing on things like retention and activation. The reason you do that is to gradually de-risk your model and tinker with your model before you go out and spend lots of marketing dollars on getting a big customer base. Because if you don't, that customer base can quickly fall off. And I think this goes into his next question as well. If it is faster to make the product and get some basic traction, is that a better position to be in than spend that time trying to get survey data, customer research questions that investors might ask for? So I think it ties into that question as well, right? The problem with just building a product and getting traction is that you're most likely going to build the wrong product. And so the research, while it might take you 2 weeks or a month longer, you're going to be more likely to build the right product. And that could be just one feature, or it could be it could be the total customer base that you're targeting. So it's a way of de-risking the method in the way that you build that's going to allow you to be, in the long run, a higher chance of success. And that's de-risking it for both you as a founder and also your investors. So if you're thinking about doing research just for investors, once again, wrong mindset. You should be doing research for yourself first and foremost, because you are the biggest investor. And if you invest your time, your own personal time and money on building the wrong product because you haven't bothered to do research because you think that you know it all, then it's probably the wrong mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
All right. Well,
Great.
that's great timing. We
Nailed it.
filled an hour here with some entertaining television on capital
TV.
raising, pitch TV. Yeah, thanks.
I will say one thing, just turning up to something like this, I've got a big philosophy that turning up is a really important thing. So all the founders that have just turned up here tonight, it might have been just one little thing that you picked up. Turning up is really important. And so thanks everybody for just turning up. Really appreciate it. It's great to see a lot of the pitch family in that too.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll see you around. Ciao.